Commander stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at the message that had arrived from the Galactic Alliance. His 4 eyes read the words again, making sure he understood correctly. The humans wanted help. They were asking for military advisors to join them in their war against the Hive. Had heard about humans before. They were the species to join the Alliance, having made contact only 50 years ago. Most of the galaxy saw them as young and inexperienced. They had fought a few small battles here and there, but nothing serious. Nothing that would test a real warrior. They were different. They were a nightmare that had haunted the galaxy for centuries. The insect-like creatures lived only to consume and spread. They turned captured enemies into food or breeding hosts for their young. No one had ever successfully driven them back from a system they claimed. Most species simply ran when they appeared. But now the humans were asking for help to fight them. Found this interesting. His own people, though, were known throughout the galaxy as master warriors. They had fought in countless campaigns and always followed the ancient codes of honor. Perhaps these young humans could learn something from a real soldier. Walked to his communication console and sent his response. He would volunteer for this mission. It would be good to teach these humans how proper warfare was conducted. The galaxy needed more species that understood honor and discipline. 3 weeks later, ship dropped out of hyperspace near the human staging ground. The planet below was called 442b according to his charts. It looked like a dusty, unimpressive world with few cities, not the kind of place he expected to find a major military operation. The human shuttle that came to collect him was small and simple. The pilot was a young woman with short brown hair who seemed far too relaxed for someone preparing for war. She chatted casually about the weather and local food while flying him down to the surface. "First time working with humans?" she asked as they descended through the atmosphere. "Yes," replied, adjusting his uniform. "I have come to share the wisdom of military tradition with your people." The pilot smiled. "That's great. General will be happy to meet you. She loves learning about different fighting styles." The military base was larger than had expected, but it still seemed crude compared to facilities. The buildings were simple metal structures with no artistic decoration. Soldiers walked around in plain uniforms carrying basic weapons. Everything looked functional but unimpressive. General Sarah met him at the landing pad. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She wore the same simple uniform as her soldiers, with no fancy decorations to show her rank. When she shook his hand, her grip was firm but not aggressive. "Welcome, Commander," she said. "We appreciate you coming all this way to help us." "It is my honor," replied, bowing slightly as custom required. "The Dominion is pleased to assist our new allies in learning proper military conduct." General smiled. "I'm sure we have a lot to learn from each other. Would you like a tour of our facilities?" As they walked through the base, noticed several things that puzzled him. The human soldiers seemed relaxed, almost casual about their upcoming mission. They joked with each other and showed no signs of the focused determination he expected from warriors preparing for battle. Their equipment also seemed strange. Instead of the advanced energy weapons most civilized species used, the humans carried simple projectile guns and explosive devices. Their vehicles were heavy and crude-looking. Their computers used old-fashioned screens instead of holographic displays. "Your technology appears somewhat primitive," said carefully, not wanting to offend his hosts. "It works for us," General replied. "We've found that simple, reliable equipment performs better under stress than complicated systems." They stopped at a training area where human soldiers were practicing combat scenarios, watched with growing confusion. The humans were not learning sword fighting or formal dueling techniques. Instead, they practiced hiding behind obstacles and attacking from concealment. They studied maps showing how to destroy enemy supply lines and communication networks. One group was learning what their instructor called acceptable loss calculations. The soldiers worked out mathematical problems about how many of their own people they could afford to lose to achieve different objectives. This concept disturbed deeply. Warriors protected each other. They did not calculate which of their brothers should die. Another group practiced something even more disturbing. They were learning to pretend to surrender, then attack when their enemies came close. This violated every principle of honorable warfare that knew. Combat was meant to be honest and direct, not filled with lies and tricks. "These tactics seem unusual," said to General. "We call it asymmetric warfare. she explained. When you're fighting an enemy that wants to eat you alive, traditional methods don't always work. That evening joined the human officers for dinner. The food was simple but good. The conversation was friendly and relaxed. These humans seemed like decent people, even if their military methods were strange. Generals showed him reports about previous attacks. The images were terrible. Entire human colonies had been consumed. Men, women, and children had been taken alive to feed young. The survivors, when there were any, spoke of horrors that made strong warriors weep. "This is why we fight the way we do," General said quietly. "They don't follow any rules. They see us as food, nothing more. Traditional warfare assumes your enemy shares some basic values with you. They don't." Studied the reports late into the night. He had fought many enemies in his career, but never anything like this. Perhaps the humans' unusual methods made sense against such creatures. Still, something about their approach bothered him. They seemed too calm, too prepared for the terrible things they planned to do. The next morning, he watched more training exercises. The humans practiced scenarios involving civilian populations. They discussed which settlements could be evacuated and which would have to be sacrificed to protect larger populations. They talked about these choices like they were discussing the weather. One young officer asked about taking prisoners. The instructor's answer chilled to his bones. "Prisoners are useful for gathering intelligence," the man said. "But remember, they're not really people like us. They're more like smart animals. Don't let that fool you into thinking they deserve the same treatment we'd give human captives." Realized he was seeing something he had never encountered before. These humans were preparing for total war, not just against armies, but against an entire species. They were getting ready to do whatever it took to win, regardless of honor or tradition. As he settled into his temporary quarters that night, wondered if he had made a mistake in coming here. He had expected to teach young warriors about honor and proper conduct. Instead, he was learning about a type of warfare that his people had never imagined. The humans were not evil, he told himself. They were just desperate. Fighting for survival sometimes required abandoning normal rules. Once this war was over, they would surely return to more civilized ways of conducting themselves. He had no idea how wrong he was. 2 weeks later, found himself aboard a human warship heading toward the outer edge of System X7. Intelligence reports indicated that a scouting force was operating in the asteroid field there. This would be the first real combat operation he witnessed with human forces. The human ship was nothing like the elegant vessels his own people built. Everything was thick metal and sharp angles. The corridors were narrow and cramped. The bridge was a small, crowded space filled with screens and blinking lights. It felt more like the inside of a machine than a proper command center. Captain, the ship's commander, seemed completely at ease despite being hours away from battle. He drank coffee from a metal cup and chatted with his crew about sports and families back home. Had never seen warriors act so casually before a fight. "First time seeing humans in action?" asked, noticing his confusion. "Yes, Captain, I must admit your crew's behavior is unexpected." Laughed, "We save the serious faces for when the shooting starts. No point being tense for hours beforehand. It just makes everyone tired." Tried to understand this logic. Warriors spent days before battle in meditation and ritual preparation. They honored their weapons and asked their ancestors for strength. These humans acted like they were going to work at an ordinary job. As they approached the asteroid field, the human crew finally became more focused. But even then, their preparations seemed wrong too. Instead of checking weapons and armor, they spent most of their time studying computer files and making calculations. "What are those reports?" asked. "Psychological profiles," responded Lieutenant, the ship's tactical officer. "We've been studying behavior patterns for months. We know how they react to different types of threats and stimuli." Was puzzled. Why does this matter? Surely courage and skill are more important than studying your enemy's thoughts. Lieutenant looked at him strangely. Understanding how your enemy thinks is the most important part of fighting them. If you know what they'll do before they do it, you can beat forces much larger than your own. The first contact came 3 hours later. Sensors detected 15 ships hiding among the larger asteroids. According to galactic military tradition, Captain should have broadcast a formal challenge and arranged the battle according to established rules of engagement. Instead, he did something that shocked completely. He ordered his ship to send out a distress signal. Captain protested, "This is not honorable. You are deceiving the enemy." "That's the point," replied calmly. "Watch and learn." The distress signal indicated that the human ship was damaged and drifting helplessly. Its engines were supposedly failing, and its weapons were offline. The message asked for assistance from any nearby vessels. The ships immediately moved in to investigate. They saw what appeared to be an easy target, a helpless human vessel they could capture without a fight. Their formations spread out as they approached, each ship hopping to be the first to claim the prize. Now said quietly, what happened next violated every principle of warfare had ever learned. The human ship's broken engines suddenly roared to life. Hidden weapons ports opened along its hull. Most shocking of all, 6 more human ships uncloaked from behind nearby asteroids where they had been waiting silently for hours. The ships found themselves surrounded and caught completely off guard. But instead of offering them a chance to surrender, as galactic law required, the humans opened fire immediately. Their weapons targeted the ship's engines first, leaving them unable to escape. Then they systematically destroyed each vessel's weapons and life support systems. "Why don't you finish them quickly?" asked, horrified by what he was witnessing. "This is cruel." "We're not trying to be cruel," Lieutenant explained. "We're gathering data. We need to see how they react to different types of damage, how long they can survive without life support, whether they'll try to ram us when they realize they're doomed." Watched in growing horror as the humans methodically tested the limits of endurance. They recorded how long it took each enemy ship to lose power. They observed how the crew behaved when they realized they were trapped. They even captured some of the escape pods to study stress responses. When the battle was over, not a single had survived. The humans had won without losing a single ship or suffering any serious damage. By any measure, it should have been considered a perfect victory. But felt sick to his stomach. This had not been a battle, it had been a scientific experiment using live subjects. General's voice came through the communication system from the command ship. "Excellent work, everyone. We've gathered valuable intelligence about tactical responses. This data will help us plan larger operations." Captain seemed pleased with the praise. "Thank you, General. The deception worked exactly as predicted. They never suspected we were setting a trap." After the ships returned to base, requested a private meeting with General. He found her in her office, reviewing reports from the battle. She looked up when he entered and smiled warmly. "Commander, what did you think of your first taste of human tactics?" "General, I must speak honestly," said, choosing his words carefully. "What I witnessed today was not warfare as my people understand it. There was no honor in that battle, no chance for the enemy to fight with dignity." General's expression became more serious. "You're right, there was no honor in it, but tell me, Commander, what honor is there in this?" She activated a wall screen that showed footage from recent attacks. Saw human children being herded into breeding chambers. He watched civilians being eaten alive while still conscious. He saw entire families dissolved in acid while young fed on their remains. "They don't understand honor," General continued. "They understand only hunger and reproduction. When we try to fight them honorably, we lose. When we lose, our people become food for their offspring." She switched to another file showing human colony ships fleeing from attacks. Thousands of refugees packed into vessels never meant to carry so many. Families separated forever as parents chose which children to save. "We tried fighting them the traditional way for the first 10 years, she said. "We followed all the galactic rules of warfare. We offered formal challenges. We gave them chances to surrender. We treated their prisoners according to standard protocols." The screen showed the results of those early battles. Human fleets destroyed, colonies consumed, millions dead or worse. "And what did we get for our honor?" General asked. "We got our people eaten. We got our children turned into incubators for alien spawn. We got extinction." She turned off the screen and looked directly at. "So we changed our approach. We decided that survival was more important than honor. We chose to become monsters so our children wouldn't become food." Struggled to find words. Everything she said made logical sense, but it still felt wrong to him. Surely there must be some middle ground, some way to be effective without abandoning all moral principles. General sat back in her chair. "Maybe there is, Commander. Maybe we're doing this all wrong. But until someone shows us a better way to keep humanity alive, we'll keep fighting the way we know works. That night could not sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. The humans had won their battle perfectly. They had achieved their objectives without losses. From a purely military standpoint, their tactics had been brilliant. But something about their casual efficiency disturbed him deeply. They had not seemed angry or desperate during the fight. They had not acted like people forced to do terrible things to survive. They had seemed almost professional about it. Like they had done it many times before. Like they had learned to enjoy it. 6 weeks into the campaign, the human fleet arrived at the system, home to the largest military installation in the sector. Expected a massive space battle followed by a difficult ground assault. What he witnessed instead was something far more disturbing. The humans did not attack the stronghold directly. Instead, they began what General called environmental preparation. For 3 days, human ships released clouds of microscopic machines into the system's asteroid belt and planetary atmospheres. "What are those devices?" asked Dr. Williams, the fleet's chief science officer. "Nanobots," she replied cheerfully. "They're designed to interfere with pheromone communication. The little guys will attach themselves to any they encounter and slowly disrupt their chemical signaling systems." Was horrified. "You are poisoning them." "Not exactly poisoning," Dr. Williams said. "More like making them crazy. Use chemical signals to coordinate with their hive mind. These nanobots will make those signals unreliable. Gradually, the affected will lose the ability to work together effectively. But this will drive them insane." "That's the idea," she said with disturbing enthusiasm. "A that can't communicate with the hive becomes paranoid and aggressive toward its own kind. They'll start attacking each other instead of us." Over the following days, watched human sensors track the progress of their biological warfare. Reports came in from across the system showing forces beginning to fight among themselves. Entire ship crews turned on each other as the nanobots disrupted their ability to share thoughts and emotions. But this was only the beginning of the human strategy. The real assault began when human infiltration teams landed on breeding worlds. These were not soldiers in any traditional sense. They were specialists in what humans called ecological warfare. Their job was not to fight warriors, but to destroy the species' ability to reproduce. Observed the mission briefings with growing alarm. The teams carried engineered viruses designed to target reproductive organs. They planted delayed action bombs in nursery chambers where young were raised. Most disturbing of all, they introduced genetic modifications into food supplies that would cause birth defects in future generations. "This is not warfare," protested to General. "This is genocide." "Yes," she replied simply, "it is." Her calm admission shocked him. "How can you say that so easily? How can you justify the systematic destruction of an entire species?" General pulled up a tactical display showing human colonies throughout the region. Red markers indicated settlements that had been attacked by forces. Yellow markers showed colonies that had been completely consumed. "Look at this map, Commander. Every red marker represents a place where human children were eaten alive. Every yellow marker is a world where an entire population was turned into breeding stock for alien spawn. We've lost 37 million people in the last 5 years." She zoomed in on one particular colony. This was New Geneva, population 200,000. My sister lived there with her family. When they came, they took the children first. They need young hosts because the eggs develop better in growing bodies. The display showed surveillance footage from the colony's final days. Forced himself to watch as workers methodically sorted human captives by age and health. Children were separated from their parents and taken to special facilities where alien eggs were implanted in their bodies. "My nephew was 8 years old," General continued. "The recordings show him being conscious for the first 3 days while the larva consumed him from the inside. He kept asking for his mother." She closed the display and looked at with eyes that showed no emotion at all. "So yes, Commander, we are committing genocide. We are systematically destroying the species, and we will continue doing it until every single one of them is dead and can never threaten human children again." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the infiltration teams. They had captured a nursery facility and found something unexpected: young hatchlings that appeared to be only a few days old. thought this might be an opportunity for the humans to show mercy. Surely even they would not harm helpless infants. He was wrong. Dr. Williams immediately requested that the hatchlings be brought aboard the command ship for research purposes. When they arrived, she began a series of experiments designed to understand how young developed fear responses and pain reactions. "Why are you doing this?" asked, unable to watch the procedures. "Knowledge is power," Dr. Williams explained. "The more we understand about psychology and biology, the more effective our weapons can be. For example, we've discovered that young are extremely sensitive to certain sound frequencies. We're developing sonic weapons that will cause immediate psychological trauma." "But these are children. They have done nothing wrong." "They're future enemies," she replied matter-of-factly. "In a few years, these children would be large enough to participate in attacks on human settlements. Every we allow to mature is a potential threat to human families." The research continued for days. The human scientists mapped every aspect of physiology and psychology. They tested the effects of different chemicals on nervous systems. They measured pain tolerance and fear responses. They documented how social isolation affected mental development. All of this information was fed into computer models that would help design better ways to kill more efficiently. But the most disturbing part was how the humans talked about this work. They discussed the torture and murder of sapient beings with the same casual professionalism that's own people used when discussing maintenance schedules or supply logistics. "The key insight," Dr. Williams explained to her research team, "is that psychological development depends heavily on pheromone feedback from adult members of their species. If we can disrupt this during critical growth phases, we can prevent them from developing normal social behaviors." "How does this help us militarily?" asked one of her assistants. "That grow up without proper social development become unable to coordinate with hive minds. They're essentially useless as soldiers. If we can expose their nurseries to our disruption compounds, entire generations will grow up mentally crippled." Realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Most species fought wars to gain territory, resources, or political advantage. Even the most brutal conflicts eventually ended with some form of negotiated peace. The humans were not fighting for territory or resources. They were not interested in political advantage or negotiated settlements. They were fighting to solve what they saw as a long-term species survival problem, and their solution was the complete elimination of their enemies. What made it truly terrifying was their systematic approach. This was not driven by anger or hatred or desperation. It was driven by careful analysis and logical planning. The humans had studied the problem of aggression and concluded that the only permanent solution was extinction. They had industrialized genocide, turning the complete destruction of another species into a carefully managed project with timelines, resource allocations, and measurable objectives. Late one night found General in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. He joined her in silence for several minutes before speaking. "General, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever have nightmares about what we're doing here? Do you ever question whether this is right?" She was quiet for a long time before answering. "Every night, Commander, I dream about those children on New Geneva. I dream about my nephew calling for his mother while alien spawn ate him alive. And when I wake up, I remember why we're doing this." She turned to look at him. "They made us choose between our conscience and our children's survival. That's not really a choice for humans. We will do anything, absolutely anything, to protect our young, even if it means becoming monsters ourselves." Stared out at the stars and wondered what kind of species could speak so calmly about becoming monsters. But as he watched human ships systematically working to exterminate an entire race, he was beginning to understand. The truly frightening thing about humans was not that they could become monsters when necessary. It was that they could become monsters while still believing they were the heroes of their own story. The final assault began on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Expected it to be a massive battle that would test human courage and determination. Instead, he watched the systematic extermination of an entire species carried out with the efficiency of a factory production line. The humans had divided their attack into phases, each one carefully planned and timed. Phase 1 involved orbital bombardment of all major population centers using weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering before death. Phase 2 targeted food production facilities with biological agents that would poison the soil for centuries. Phase 3 was the deployment of hunter-killer robots programmed to track down and eliminate any survivors. But it was Phase 4 that finally showed what humans truly were. "We call this the documentation phase," explained Colonel Martinez, the operations planning officer. "We need to record everything we've learned about fighting the future generations should know exactly how to deal with them if any survivors ever try to rebuild." Watched as human teams moved through the ruins of cities, carefully cataloging every aspect of their society. They recorded architectural patterns, social structures, technological capabilities, and biological weaknesses. They interviewed dying about their culture and history. They preserved samples of art, literature, and music. "Why are you doing this?" asked. "You are destroying them completely. Why preserve their culture?" "Because knowledge is power," Colonel Martinez replied. "The more we understand about the better we can prevent anyone like them from threatening us again. We're creating a complete guide for fighting hive-mind species." That's when realized the true scope of human planning. This was not just about this was about every potential enemy humanity might face in the future. "Colonel, may I see these documentation files?" "Sure, most of it isn't classified. We want other species to learn from our experience." What found in the human database horrified him beyond anything he had seen in the battlefield. The humans had not just studied they had detailed files on every species in the galaxy, including their allies. The file on his own people was labeled Dominion Threat Assessment Level 3. It contained detailed analysis of military capabilities, cultural weaknesses, and strategic vulnerabilities. There were maps of every major military installation. There were psychological profiles of important leaders. There were plans for disrupting supply lines and communication networks. Most shocking of all, there was a document titled Elimination Protocol Implementation Timeline, 18 months. "What is this?" demanded, showing the file to Colonel Martinez. "Oh, that's just standard military planning," the colonel replied casually. "We have elimination protocols for every known species. It's basic strategic thinking. You need to know how to fight every potential enemy, even current allies." "You have plans to exterminate my people." "We have plans to exterminate everyone," Martinez said matter-of-factly. "That's what military planning departments do. They prepare for all possible conflicts. The Federation, the Empire, the Crystalline Collective, we have detailed extinction protocols for all of them." Scrolled through more files, each one more terrifying than the last. The humans had analyzed every species' biology to identify optimal methods for their destruction. They had studied cultural psychology to determine the most effective terror tactics. They had calculated resource requirements and timelines for complete planetary sterilization. "This is insane," whispered. "You're planning to kill everyone in the galaxy." "Not planning," Colonel Martinez corrected. "Prepared to if necessary. There's a difference. We hope we'll never need to use these plans, but if any species threatens human survival the way that did, we'll be ready." The colonel pulled up a presentation that made blood run cold. It was titled Systematic Approach to Species-Level Conflict Resolution. It outlined human military doctrine for fighting wars against entire civilizations. "The key insight," Martinez explained, "is that traditional warfare assumes your enemy shares some basic values with you. Honor, mercy, the protection of non-combatants. But what do you do when your enemy doesn't share those values? What do you do when negotiation is impossible and coexistence is not an option?" The presentation showed comparative analysis of different types of enemies. Species driven by honor could be defeated through careful manipulation of their codes of conduct. Species motivated by profit could be defeated through economic warfare. Species controlled by religious beliefs could be defeated by attacking their faith systems. "But some enemies," Martinez continued, "can only be defeated through complete extinction." There were one example. Their entire biology and psychology was built around consumption and reproduction. There was no way to reason with them, no way to redirect their aggression, no way to satisfy their needs without sacrificing human lives. The presentation concluded with a for determining when extinction was the appropriate response to a threat. It was terrifyingly logical and thorough. We've learned that the galaxy is full of species that could become existential threats to humanity, Martinez said. Our job is to be ready for all of them. The survival of our species depends on our ability to eliminate any threat permanently. Spent the rest of the day going through human military files. What he found painted a picture of a species unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans didn't just fight wars, they solved species-level problems with extreme prejudice. They had studied every form of life they had encountered, not out of scientific curiosity, but to catalog potential threats and develop appropriate responses. Their databases contained detailed plans for the biological, psychological, and cultural destruction of hundreds of different species. But the most disturbing aspect was how they organized this information. It wasn't stored in some secret military facility accessible only to high-ranking officers. It was part of their standard military curriculum. Every human officer learned about extinction protocols as part of their basic training. They had turned genocide into an academic discipline, taught in schools and refined through scientific research. Young human officers studied the destruction of entire species the way people studied ancient poetry. That evening requested another private meeting with General. He found her in her quarters, reading reports about the day's operations on the General, I need to ask you something directly. Do humans really see every other species as potential enemies? She looked up from her reports. Not enemies, Commander, potential threats. There's an important difference. Is there? Your people have detailed plans for exterminating my entire species. Yes, we do, she admitted without hesitation. We have extinction protocols for every known sapient species in the galaxy, including our closest allies. It's not because we want to use them. It's because we need to be prepared for any possibility. How can you speak so casually about planning mass murder? General set down her reports and looked at him with tired eyes. Commander, let me tell you something about human history. For most of our existence, we fought wars against our own kind. We developed incredibly sophisticated methods for killing other humans. We created weapons capable of destroying all life on our planet. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's military history, saw images of devastating human conflicts that had killed millions. We learned some important lessons from those wars, she continued. The most important lesson was this: the only way to ensure permanent peace is to make war too costly for anyone to consider. We achieved peace on Earth not through treaties or negotiations, but by making it clear that any aggressor would face complete annihilation. So you extended this philosophy to the entire galaxy. We had to, she said. When we made contact with other species, we realized that the galaxy was full of potential threats to human survival. Species with superior technology, larger populations, or incompatible ideologies. We couldn't control these threats through diplomacy or trade agreements. The display changed to show galactic military balance assessments. Humans were significantly outnumbered by almost every other major species. So we developed what we call mutual assured extinction, General explained. We made it clear to everyone that attacking humanity would result in the complete destruction of the attacker's species, not just military defeat, total extinction. No survivors, no rebuilding, no second chances. And other species accepted this. Most of them don't fully understand it yet, she admitted. They think we're just another military power trying to establish dominance through intimidation. They don't realize that we're completely serious about following through on our threats. Thought about his own government's response to human alliance proposals. The leadership had seen humans as useful but ultimately manageable allies. They had no idea what they were actually dealing with. What about species that pose no threat to you? He asked. Peaceful civilizations with no military ambitions. They're the safest of all, General said. Our threat assessment protocols are very sophisticated. Peaceful species with compatible values get classified as permanent allies. They receive protection and support from humanity. But species that show any signs of potential aggression toward human settlements get moved to higher threat levels. And what determines these threat levels? Capability and intent, she replied. We monitor every species' military development, territorial expansion, and cultural attitudes toward other races. When a species reaches the point where they could pose an existential threat to humanity, they get reclassified. Reclassified to what? Target status, she said simply. Species designated as targets get moved to active monitoring. We begin developing specific extinction protocols for them. We identify key weaknesses and plan preliminary operations. If they cross the line from potential threat to active threat, we implement final solutions. Realized that he was looking at the future of galactic civilization. Humanity would expand throughout the galaxy, categorizing every species they encountered. Those deemed compatible would be allowed to survive under human protection. Those deemed threatening would be systematically eliminated. It was not conquest in any traditional sense. It was ecological management on a galactic scale, with humans as the ultimate predator species ensuring their own survival by controlling all potential competition. "General," he said quietly, "what you're describing is not just warfare. It's the complete domination of all other life in the galaxy." "Yes," she replied without hesitation, "it is." 6 months after the complete extinction of the species, sat in his private quarters aboard the transport ship carrying him back to space. He was writing his final report about the human military campaign, but the words came slowly. How could he explain what he had witnessed? The war had ended exactly as the humans had planned. Every world was now lifeless, every ship destroyed, every member of the species dead or dying from engineered plagues. The threat to human civilization had been eliminated permanently and completely. The galaxy had celebrated humanity's victory. News reports praised the humans as saviors who had removed a terrible danger to all civilized species. Galactic Council members gave speeches about human courage and determination. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchange programs were established. No one seemed to understand what had actually happened. Tried to write his report in neutral military language, but every sentence felt inadequate. How could he describe watching an entire species being systematically erased from existence? How could he explain the casual efficiency with which humans had turned genocide into a management problem? "The human approach to warfare differs significantly from established galactic norms," he wrote, then deleted the words. "Too weak, too diplomatic. Human military doctrine prioritizes permanent solutions over temporary victories," he tried again. Still not right. Finally, he wrote, "Humanity represents an existential threat to all other sapient species in the galaxy. They have industrialized extinction and developed protocols for the complete elimination of any species they classify as hostile. Their alliance offers are not partnerships, they are ultimatums." He stared at the words for a long time, then saved the file and marked it for immediate transmission to High Command. When his ship arrived was surprised to find that his report had already been reviewed and classified at the highest levels. Admiral, his superior officer, met him at the spaceport with a small security detail. "Commander, welcome home," the Admiral said formally. "I trust your mission with the humans was educational." "Yes, sir, very educational. Did you read my full report?" "I did, quite interesting. We should discuss it privately." They rode in silence to military headquarters. Admiral's office was in the secured section of the building, protected by multiple layers of electronic surveillance countermeasures. Once inside, the Admiral activated additional privacy shields. "Now then," Admiral said, settling into his chair, "tell me your honest assessment of human military capabilities." "Admiral, they are not what they appear to be. The humans are not just another military power. They are a species-level predator that has developed systematic methods for eliminating potential threats. They have detailed extinction protocols for every known species, including us." Admiral nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. Your report confirms intelligence we've been gathering through other sources." "Other sources?" "We are not the only species that has been studying humanity, Commander. Several governments have become concerned about human expansion and military doctrine. There have been discussions." Felt a chill of fear. What kind of discussions? "The kind that happen when multiple species realize they face a common threat. The Federation has shared intelligence indicating that humans have been conducting detailed surveillance of their military installations. The Empire has detected human spy networks gathering information about their industrial capacity. The Crystalline Collective has intercepted human communications discussing optimal strike patterns for their home system." Admiral activated a holographic display showing a map of local galactic space. Red markers indicated human territory and known military assets. Yellow markers showed areas under human surveillance or influence. The pattern is clear, Admiral continued. Humanity is systematically gathering intelligence on every species in the region. They are not preparing for defensive operations. They are planning offensive campaigns against multiple targets simultaneously. Has anyone tried to confront them about this? Ambassador Al raised the issue during the last Galactic Council session. He asked General directly about human military intentions toward other Alliance members. What was her response? She said that human military planning was designed to ensure permanent peace through the elimination of all potential sources of conflict. When pressed for clarification, she stated that any species threatening human security would face appropriate responses scaled to the level of threat they represented. Remembered General's casual discussions of extinction protocols. In other words, they would be destroyed. Precisely. But here's what makes the situation truly dangerous, Commander. The humans have made it clear that they consider any attempt by other species to coordinate defensive measures as evidence of hostile intent. Admiral pulled up another file showing recent diplomatic communications between human representatives and various governments. Ambassador Williams told the Federation that mutual defense pacts between non-human species represent potential coalition building against human interests. Trade Minister Johnson informed the Empire that technological sharing agreements with other species could lead to military advantages that threaten human security. Began to understand the trap that humanity had set. They're preventing anyone from organizing effective resistance. Worse than that, Admiral said grimly. They're classifying normal diplomatic and trade relationships as evidence of hostile intent. According to human threat assessment protocols, any species that cooperates too closely with other non-human governments gets reclassified as a potential enemy coalition. So our options are to submit to human dominance or be marked for extinction. Those appear to be the only choices they're offering, yes. Admiral closed the files and looked directly at. Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you privately. The government has been discussing our options, and we need information that only you can provide. What kind of information? Could we win a war against humanity? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Thought about everything he had witnessed during the campaign. The systematic planning, the industrial efficiency, the complete lack of moral restraints when human survival was at stake. No, he said finally. We could not win a war against them, neither could anyone else. Even if multiple species coordinated their efforts. Especially then, replied. The humans have studied every possible coalition scenario. They know exactly how long it would take each species to mobilize forces, how we would likely coordinate attacks, and what our combined capabilities would be. They've been planning for this possibility since they first made contact with the galaxy. Admiral sat in silence for several minutes. So we have no choice but to accept whatever terms they offer. I think our choice was made for us years ago, said. The humans have been positioning themselves as the dominant species since they joined the Alliance. Every diplomatic agreement, every trade deal, every military cooperation treaty has been designed to increase their control over galactic affairs. And no one realized what was happening. No one wanted to realize it, corrected. The humans were so helpful, so friendly, so willing to assist with various problems. Who would suspect that helpful allies were systematically gathering intelligence for future conquest? Admiral stood and walked to the window overlooking the capital. What do you think will happen to us, Commander? I think we'll be allowed to continue existing as long as we remain useful to human interests, replied. We'll keep our territory, our government, our cultural independence, but ultimate authority will rest with humanity. We'll become a client state in a galactic empire ruled from Earth. And if we become inconvenient, if human interests change. Thought about the, now a lifeless rock floating in space. He thought about human extinction protocols and systematic elimination procedures. He thought about General's matter-of-fact discussions of genocide as a management tool. Then we'll be reclassified as a threat, he said quietly, and threats to human security get eliminated. That evening, returned to his family home for the first time in almost a year. His wife and children welcomed him with joy and celebration. They wanted to hear stories about his adventures with the heroic humans who had saved the galaxy from the terrible. He told them sanitized versions of what he had seen. He described human courage and determination. He praised their tactical brilliance and technological innovation. He said nothing about extinction protocols or systematic genocide or threat assessment classifications. Later that night, as his family slept peacefully, stood on his balcony looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human fleets were expanding their influence throughout the galaxy. Human intelligence networks were gathering information about potential threats. Human planners were updating their databases of species weaknesses and optimal elimination strategies. His own people were probably already being monitored. Human agents were likely studying military installations, cultural patterns, and psychological vulnerabilities. Somewhere in a computer database on Earth was a file labeled Elimination Protocol with detailed plans for destroying his entire species if they ever stepped out of line. The most terrifying part was that the humans genuinely believed they were the heroes of this story. They saw themselves as protectors of galactic civilization, bravely willing to make the hard choices necessary to ensure peace and stability. They would eliminate threats with the same moral certainty that other species used to protect their children. Realized that he had joined humans in war to help them become better warriors. Instead, he had learned what it meant to be prey. The galaxy was now dominated by a species that could commit genocide with industrial efficiency while maintaining absolute certainty that they were morally justified in doing so. They would create peace through the systematic elimination of anyone capable of disturbing that peace. And the most horrible part was that their plan was working perfectly. As he watched the stars, wondered how long it would be before his own people were reclassified from ally to threat. How long before human planners decided that independence was incompatible with human security interests. How long before his children became statistics in another human military campaign. He had no answers to these questions, but he knew with absolute certainty that when that day came, it would already be too late to do anything about it. The humans had won the war for galactic dominance before anyone else even realized they were fighting it.